Hi everyone, how are we doing today? Good? Awesome. We've had some incredible speakers here at the Agile Tour Bangkok, and we've heard a lot about culture, we've heard a lot about businesses, we've heard a lot of great stories of people using Agile and how that's working out and some tips to take away. So I'm really excited to provide the closing keynote here on business agility. How many people have heard this phrase before today? It's becoming a little bit more of a buzzword, right? We're starting to hear about how Agile is important to apply in all kinds of different departments, different applications. We need to be Agile all throughout the business more than ever before to keep up. A couple of days ago, I was flying in from Australia, where I was speaking at the Scrum Australia event, and I happened to be traveling on Halloween. Does anyone else here dress up for Halloween? Not too much? I know, I didn't see very many other costumes, but I ended up dressing like a gangster cat because I felt like this kind of embodied the concept of Agile and business agility. So when you think about a gangster cat, what makes a cat gangster? Well, you just need a gold chain, right? And I was thinking about, okay, what is Agile about this? I mean, cats are pretty agile, if you think about it. They respond, they adapt to change, they do stuff pretty differently, right? They're pretty hard to catch if you ever try to catch them. And then, what about gangsters? Let's look at the positive attributes of gangsters. Now, there's a lot of violence with gangster stuff, so let's set that aside and just look at some of the positive aspects here. So, very strong culture, right? We've got high engagement from people that are in a gang. We've got loyalty and trust, and social support and community involvement. Is it safe to say that a gangsta cat's pretty agile? No? Yes? All right. Well, let's talk about how business agility applies to organizations. So, what's a good definition of business agility? Well, if we look at the distinct qualities that allow organizations to respond rapidly to changes in both the internal and external environment without losing momentum or vision. This is what we're talking about when we talk about business agility. How can we adapt? How can we stay relevant? How can we operate in a way that no matter what happens inside our walls of our organization or outside externally in the market, that we can stay relevant? I mean, let's look at some new technology platforms that are revolutionizing industries. We have some common ones are Airbnb or Uber. We've got looking at different financial services type of apps where you can send money, Bitcoin. There's these new platforms that are coming up that are challenging the way that we've done business for decades, sometimes hundreds of years. We can't do things the same way because we don't know where a new competitor's coming from. We don't know if we're gonna lose market share because the environment that we operate in is changing all the time. Even there's an article in Forbes that talked about what is the difference between the traditional approach and Agile. Now, if we just look at where we're at today, we have today's view of the opportunity. And well, here's what we think the opportunity is from what we can see right here, right now. But as many of us know, our plans that we plan out in a traditional way don't necessarily carry us through. Often we'll have to replan or we'll have to make changes. So if we can iterate, the actual opportunity could be much further than we thought, but we don't know that today. We have to be able to adapt as we go. So this is why business agility is so important, because we can't guess accurately what the future is going to hold. And also, the things that got us to where we're at today aren't necessarily going to help us get to where we want to be. Has anyone heard this phrase before? So when we think about, well, what got us to where we're at now, maybe if we want to do even better, if we want to excel in the market even more, we might have to do something different. We might have to do something different than how we've worked to get to that next point. Is anyone here familiar with the Satir change model? The Satir change model by Virginia Satir talks about how if we've got a status quo of how we're working, in order to get to higher performance, that's what we really want with Agile, right? Higher performance. Well, there needs to be some kind of foreign element or something to shake up the status quo. If we're working in the same way, Well, how are we going to just magically get up to that new level of higher performance, right? So usually there's some kind of foreign object that will kind of shake things up. But we don't just instantly excel up to those greater heights. Usually there's a little bit of chaos. In fact, things might get worse before they get better. Has anyone here been at a company that started to use Agile and there's been some conflict or challenge? Right? Yeah, a little bit of friction. Because it's change, it's different, it's uncomfortable. That's normal. But has anyone here stuck with it and seen some benefits? Seen things get better? Yeah, so after you go through those peaks and valleys, after we have that transforming idea of how this change can work for us, as team members maybe start to see how it's a beneficial way to work more collaboratively and delivering things in increments, well, now we can start to get that momentum and reach that state of higher performance. But it doesn't just happen where we just leap right up to that higher state. There's often some challenge with that. So we know that the traditional approach, many of us are familiar with the waterfall method, and we go from requirements to design, development, testing, implementation. And we know that with Agile, we can cycle through these same things, these same phases, and we can deliver incrementally and we can improve as we go. Now, when we start to think about business agility, it's more than just development. So we start to work in an Agile way in our development teams, but when we actually go to market, if we go into a traditional marketing cycle, are we going to see a lot more benefit? Or do we slip back into the traditional methods of marketing? So if we're trying to go end-to-end business agility, we have to consider different things for different departments. We have to consider the whole organization, not just IT. Now, imagine if you're starting to develop and market in that iterative way. If we can start to really think about how we're going to reach the end customer as we're developing, that can help us to get our product to market more effectively. I've actually been working with some companies in the US where we found that the development teams are so agile that marketing can't keep up. So they've got all these features that they're just sitting there ready, but nobody knows about them. Now that's kind of a luxury problem, right? But it's kind of funny in a way, because we see this and we're like, well, wait a minute. Maybe we could be more agile in our marketing as well. Last year, I was working with an insurance company, one of the largest insurance companies in Portugal. And they've been around for over 200 years and have about 40% of the market. And we were planning out one of their upcoming marketing campaigns. And we started building a visual funnel. So we had Post-it notes all up on the wall. And we're saying, okay, what's the entry point for the customer? Then what happens? And then what do they see? What's the messaging? And then how do we reach them? And how do we follow up? And I asked them, I said, okay, how long is this going to take to execute this marketing plan? How long do you think that they said? They said 3 to 4 months. Now that's a quarter of a year. So we're gonna wait a quarter of a year to market a new product? Does that seem long to anybody? Right, seeing a lot of heads nodding. So I said, okay, what if we took a concept from development of the minimum viable product, and let's look at what's our minimum viable campaign? What could we release just to test the interest of people for this new product? And they said, well, I guess we could go through our existing network of different resellers or agents, and maybe we could just have a landing page. So maybe there's a 3-part email sequence that goes out, hits a landing page, and they can schedule a free consult. And then we can offer them the new product and explain it to them. Okay, how long might that take? They said 1 to 2 weeks. Ah, there we go. Now we have something that can get the messaging out sooner. But if our marketing departments, our sales teams, if they're operating in a traditional method, we're not getting the full benefits of Agile from end to end. Does that make sense? So what we want to do is we really want to think about business agility and how can we get this throughout the whole organization, throughout different departments, and even translate it into speaking their language. Using IT examples doesn't necessarily make sense to other departments. So can you truly be agile as an organization if the only department that's agile is IT? Because that's where we see a lot of companies using agile. But what if we looked at other departments? What if we looked at marketing, at HR, at finance? A friend of mine is an Agile coach that was working with a company a few years back, and they were looking at how they could be more Agile in HR. They had a 90-day hiring process. Does that sound long to anyone? Yeah, I think I heard some gasps in the audience there. So 90 days. If you were interviewing for a job and they said it would take 90 days to get back to you, or if it took 2 to 3 months, would you probably look for something else? Or maybe accept another job, right? So when you look at that, okay, we have to be better if we're gonna maintain and attract top talent. So they had this one team that worked on becoming sort of this Agile task force on, hey, how can we be more Agile in HR? Would you believe they got down to 1 day hiring? Incredible, right? From 90 days to 1 day hiring. Now, how fast could they attract and retain top talent there? A lot more likely, right? So when we think about these concepts, we need to look at different departments and look at how we can speak their language and share these concepts. Look at doing a pilot project, looking at introducing so that we can have Agile in many other departments throughout the organization. Now, over the last several years, about 3 to 4 years, I've been traveling a lot over the last 5 years. And a couple of you have probably, if we're connected on social media, you've seen a lot of these travels. But what I started asking every time I went into a company, every time I did a training class, every time I worked with a team, and I would say, what do you see is going to be your biggest challenge that you think it will be taking these things back to your company and actually applying Agile? And then I asked another question. Even though we know that there's going to be challenges, what could be the biggest opportunity or benefit if we apply Agile and if it works well? What could be the positive side of that? Would you like to hear the results? Yeah? All right. So when we look at the challenges, these are things that we want to expect. Because if we don't expect the challenges, then we might be shocked. But if we look at the SAT-tier change model, if we've got a status quo and we want to get to that level of higher performance, we know there's going to be a little bit of chaos, a little bit of change that we have to become accustomed to before we can then get to that higher level of positivity. So there are some opportunities there, but if we're not ready for the challenges, we might think Agile doesn't work. We might think that, oh, this Scrum thing, well, that's not really that effective, when many of us know one thing that Agile and Scrum do very well is actually surface all impediments. It will bring to the surface exactly what's dysfunctional in your organization if you're trying to deliver in a couple of weeks, right? So last year, this is just a summary of all the locations I visited by month. I'm aware this is ridiculous, and I had an intervention given to me earlier this year by some friends that care, and they challenged me to travel less. I have been traveling less, as I say in Thailand, but I passed through over 80 cities and 15 countries. That's about an average of 7 per month. Last time I checked, there's only 4 weeks in a month. Needless to say, I've been gathering data across the world on what organization challenges are across a variety of different geographic locations and across a variety of different industries. So I've got a little bit of empirical data here for you. So every time I would ask them, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge? And what do you think is going to be the biggest opportunity? I noticed that some themes started to emerge. There were some commonalities, some things that I said, you know what, that sounds familiar. I heard that in a different city. And so I started to pull together what were those common themes. And when we look at the challenges, one that came up time and time again, organizational buy-in. Okay, so I'm being taught this, but when I go back out and to actually work with my teams, is this something that I'm going to be supported in the organization? Is there leadership support? Is this something that, you know, we actually are going to be supported in the environment of how we work? Are our team members even going to be engaged? Are they going to follow this new approach? And notice there's a lot of uncertainty that's kind of all about the environment and the support. Okay, so I'm learning this Agile approach, but am I going to be able to have the opportunity to effectively apply it? Also, the culture. Now, what's interesting is that culture didn't start to come up until I started talking about culture. It wasn't even on the table at first. But then as soon as you start mentioning it, just 1 or 2 mentions of culture, people start going, oh, is that gonna work here? Is this how we're used to operating? Is that gonna be a fit? And then also delivering. Now this usually came with organizational impediments. If we have organizational impediments, if we have challenges that, it's in the approval process. And I used to use this as a joke until I had a company say, nope, that's us, that's the real thing. Where you have to get like 9 different people's approvals before you can even release something, or before you can, have a dependency with another team. If your approval process alone takes 3 weeks, how can you deliver in 2-week sprints? So we start to look at these challenges, and these are the common themes that people kept saying time and time again, that they thought, you know what, this Agile stuff sounds good, but am I going to be able to apply this in my environment? Now, it didn't stop there, because I said, wait a minute, we know that there should be some benefits based on the results that we hear about other companies in the industry. So what are some of those opportunities? What could be a possibility if you still apply Agile and it works and you get some kind of benefit? And so the things that they said were, well, maybe we could actually start delivering regularly. Maybe we could get something out and not get stuck in all the mumble jumble of just trying to create something, trying to get something completed. They said, what about satisfied customers? What if our customers were actually really happy? What if they were delighted with the things that we're doing? What if we were delivering them features that they found valuable? And what if we could gain predictability? Now, this is something that a lot of times upper leadership management really likes, right? So what can we deliver when? What's that cadence going to be? And having that predictability, if the teams are working in iterations and they have a velocity, they start to get some consistency, some momentum. Okay, maybe we could actually be more accurate in what we're able to deliver. And then also having engaged teams. What if, yeah, we might have a little bit of resistance at first, but what if we actually had people that liked working this way in a more collaborative way? And what if the quality even went up as we worked? What if we had better alignment in what we were releasing? What if our team was more aligned with the mission of the organization? What if we actually did something meaningful that mattered? And so I thought this was pretty interesting when you look at the opportunities. Now, do you think that these opportunities are worth going through some of those challenges? Yeah. So as we look at how we're working in our teams and we're starting to get some benefits, one question I'd like to invite you to think about is, how can we expand this throughout the organization more? If you look at the Scrum Master Checklist by Michael James at scrummasterchecklist.org, he talks about, to be a good Scrum Master, you should be doing all of these things, not just facilitating some meetings, but you should be serving the product owner, serving the team, helping the team have access to engineering practices, and also be supporting the organization, being that change agent, being able to look at what are the organizational impediments. How is Agile working at a greater scale in the organization? So according to Michael James, that is part of the Scrum Master responsibilities, is that we're thinking about the greater organization. Now, what if we start looking outside of just our IT department and looking at how we can invite other areas to also start to, we've heard the words experiment, do a pilot, let's see, hey, what could happen? What could we try that could maybe get a result? So one thing I'd like to invite you to think about, when you think about business agility, can we think more like an entrepreneur? In 2010, there was a global Scrum gathering in Cape Town, South Africa. And I was there with a videographer, and we were doing some interviews with people at the gathering. And we were asking them about their experience with Agile, how they use Scrum, talking about different hot topics in the industry. And there was one particular day, I was going with the videographer up to Tabletop Mountain to get like the epic shot overlooking the city. And we're sitting there in this van, and he said, Maria, I have to ask you, I've been hearing people talk about this Agile stuff and this Scrum stuff for 2 days now. What is it? And I was like, oh, it didn't occur to me that he didn't have the context, and he's been listening to all of these people talk about it and didn't really know what it was. And so I took a moment, I explained to him what Agile was, and very briefly the Scrum framework and how it's delivering incrementally, getting feedback, and then adapting. He looked at me and he just goes, isn't that just common sense? And I was like, oh, no, I didn't explain it right. Let me try again. And then I was like, okay, maybe it is, but shh, don't tell anybody. This is what we do. We train people on this stuff. And I thought about what he said, and I thought, you know what? maybe it is a lot of common sense, and maybe, you know, him being an entrepreneur, him having this company that he did videography services, he's like, that's how I have to work. Why wouldn't I show my customer or client what the product is and get their feedback? Otherwise, I don't know if it's the right thing. And I started to think about this more, and I realized as businesses, we have to scale and we have to add processes as we grow, right? So how many people here work for what you consider a large company? Like maybe close to 1,000 employees, multiple offices, maybe over 500 employees, over 100 employees. Okay, so the larger the company, the more that we have process, the more that we have a system or things that are put into place so that we can work in a way that's going to be maybe consistent or more manageable. I had someone in a training class just about a month or two ago, and it was one of the best sandwich shops that I'd ever had. Like, this is one of my favorite places to eat. Just like grab a sandwich and go. Not so much fast food, but like quality food quickly. And they have the best product, they have the best consistency. And one thing that came up in the class when we started talking about culture is he said, you know what? We're kind of command and control. I was like, really? That's interesting, because you guys have like the best servers. It seems like you have a wonderful culture because everything, it's great. The quality is there in the delivery. People seem, bought into the process. They seem happy. And he said, well, actually, that's how we're so good at what we do, is because every single thing we do is a checklist. Everything that we do, we have, here's exactly what needs done. Here's the order it needs done. And that's how they maintain the quality and delivery. That's how they have that consistency. And I was like, whoa, that never occurred to me, that what makes them so great to their customers actually might be challenging in the culture at the organization, at the corporate office. And I hadn't really thought about that before, that what I saw as great, excellent service might not be the best way for people to work on the inside, internally to the organization. So I want to challenge you to think like an entrepreneur. Think, how can I do maybe the simplest thing that could possibly work? This is a phrase that I've heard in the Agile space, and I love this phrase, and I've used this when I've felt stuck before. What is the simplest thing that could possibly work that could help us deliver something at the end of the next 2 weeks? What is the simplest thing that could possibly work that we could try, that could get us past this roadblock? And when we think about business agility, I think of a company not having all the red tape. I think of a company that can act like an entrepreneur, where you can make a decision and turn on a dime, and you can pivot when needed. And so really what we're trying to do is infuse some of that back into these larger corporations. Because a really good entrepreneur, a really good startup company, they're pretty agile, aren't they? They're pretty agile by nature. In order to survive, they have to be. So that's what we're trying to get back to. I'd like to share with you an example of a friend of mine launched a company within less than a week. And the way that he did this, we call this Writing on Coffee is the company here. So my friend used to go to this coffee shop all the time, and he was pretty good at poetry, and he also did photography. And one day he couldn't find a napkin but had a great poem in mind, and so he grabbed the closest thing to him, which was a coffee cup, and he wrote this exquisite poem. And then, a few days later, he's at the coffee shop again. He's like, you know what, that's kind of fun, wrote another poem on a coffee cup. And I saw his posts online, and I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And I was talking with him, and I was like, hey, have you ever thought about turning that into a business? I feel like there's something really unique there. That might be like a nice gift for somebody or something like that, something thoughtful, something unique. And so we ended up putting together this website for him, writingoncoffee.com. And essentially, you could scroll through and you could pick from the different product offerings, and you could pick different poems that you could put on different printed products. Now, what do you get for that person that just has everything? You might be somebody who is a business owner, might be an executive, might be someone that, whatever they want for themselves, they just buy. So, you can't really think of a gift for them. I was like, well, usually people like that might be fairly independent or strong, and they might have they have their own company, they might be very busy, they probably drink coffee, right? This is probably somebody that's ambitious. So I was looking at this, okay, what if we take the option for people to pick different poems from different coffee cups and then print them on maybe a picture frame. Got the pillow, the t-shirt, my personal favorite, the mug on the mug. We've got the female shirt and the bag. Wow, what a creative, unique little thing you can customize. I personally want to take this, franchise it for coffee shops and go on Shark Tank, but we'll get there. But when you think about this concept, what does it take to launch this product, to launch this to market? 1 week to build the website and get it out there. This is something that it didn't take a lot because we already had the idea and had a means. How many third-party print-on-demand platforms are there? Well, there's enough that we could pick one and go with it. Now, what do you think our profit margins were on these? Oh, they were terrible because it was print on demand 1 by 1. But we can launch this to market in 1 week, and then iteration 2, look at getting better profit margins. Look at getting maybe a different shipping or printing type of service, or look at ordering in bulk, or look at having a company buy a handful of so we could print more than one at a time. So the important thing was that we got it to market, and now let's look at optimizing. So let's deliver something, optimize later. Let's prove the concept. Let's see if anybody even wants it. So that's how, when we're talking about business agility, like, this is what we want at a larger corporation. We want to be able to take an idea, we want to take a product, take a feature, and then actually market it, see what people respond with, see how people use it, and see what that feedback is. So I got another example for you, and this time it's actual coffee. So a couple of years ago, we started experimenting. Nick Cementa brought him on to work with me at my company, Formula Inc., and I said, hey, will you help me with business development? Now, his background was marketing and advertising. And so, of course, I brought him to an Agile training class. It was one of the first things. I said, hey, here's what we do, so you should probably go through this. And he started looking at how to apply this to his own context. So he said, Maria, could you apply Agile to marketing? It's like, of course you could. You could apply Agile to anything, right? And so he started experimenting with one of our clients. And this was the monthly revenue of this company. And would you say, is this good or bad? What do you think? Okay? I mean, there's some growth at the beginning, but it kind of goes up and down, but it's generally trending up, right? Does anybody want more context? Need a little more information? All right, what if this is over the course of a year? What if this continued for 2 years? What about 3 years? Would that be enough? Would that be okay, or is that kind of stagnant? Ultimately, we saw this as not really a lot of growth. I mean, if we're not really getting much more in sales, at what point are we going to really be able to maintain where we're at in the market? So we started experimenting. We started applying Agile to how we marketed the product. Now, this was an acid-free coffee company. So they were selling acid-free coffee. Now, what do you think would be some selling points on acid-free coffee? Maybe healthier? Maybe, it's more organic, it's going to be better for you. They were basically just selling based on the benefits. But what we realized is that we were really missing on the message to market match. And once we started applying Agile in how they marketed, we actually saw more than 300% increased revenue in 6 months and over 780% increased revenue in 1 year. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, how did we do that? And Nick's like, I just applied Agile like you taught me. I'm like, oh, of course you did, right? And so what we started to do is we started doing these short iterations and split testing, because when you are running marketing campaigns, you don't know what you don't know. If there's a better way to market, but you're just doing the same messaging, you just turn on the faucet, throw on the ad dollars, and just kind of let it run, we don't know if there's a better way. We don't know if we're missing out on sales, right? Well, some sales are coming in. Is that enough? I don't know. So what we started to do is we actually wrote user stories, 5 different user stories for different personas with a very specific focus on what the need was. And so as we know, the user story format is as a who, I need what, so that why. And so we actually started basing our ads on the user stories. We said, okay, who truly needs acid-free coffee? Who could really benefit from this? And we came up with people that had physical ailments. What about people that had Crohn's or colitis, ulcers, pylori, or we split test that against having a free sample that we had been doing the whole time. Now, what we saw was that when we ran these campaigns, one performed just a little bit better than the others. And where would you put your marketing dollars? Would it be number 3? Do I hear number 3? Yeah, right? In fact, why would you even put any of your marketing dollars in the other things? It's over 600% better return. I mean, maybe we'd still do the free sample, maybe we'd still do the pylori ads, but we found that people with ulcers, now what kind of people have ulcers? Maybe it's people in high-stress jobs. Maybe it's people that they're like that executive, they're like maybe in a sales type of job, maybe they are that entrepreneur, and they need that coffee to get through the day. But if they're getting physical pain, are they just gonna quit drinking the coffee? How many coffee drinkers do we have in this room? All right, there they are. Yep, I see all those hands. Yep. If I just said, oh, you shouldn't drink coffee tomorrow because it's not that good for you, would you just stop cold turkey? No, I'm seeing some heads going, no, not a chance, right? So when you think about that, that's what was happening. These people were in these stressful jobs. They needed coffee to get through their day, and they still drank the coffee and had the pain. And they pushed through it because, I don't know, maybe they were stubborn, maybe they just didn't know what else to do, but that's what was happening. So when we said we have a solution for you, and we actually put out the ads that really spoke to that type of person with that specific challenge, sales went through the roof. So what we realized is that direction is more important than speed. And a lot of times our organizations are operating in the same way that they have been for a while, not knowing there's even a better alternative or a better way to work. Now, back to the HR example, 90 days for the hiring cycle is a little bit long, and I think we all can recognize that. But if that's their standard mode of operation, maybe they didn't see the problem. Even if it's 30 days or 60 days, who knew that one company actually got down to 1 day hiring? Who knew that was even possible if we don't experiment, if we don't try, if we don't do something different than how we've always done it, even though things are going okay? And that's what thinking like an entrepreneur is, and I think that's how that can help us with applying business agility, is if we start to challenge the status quo and just ask questions. Can we run an experiment? Can we try something different than what we've done before? Now for this coffee company, we actually had to pause the ads multiple times. Why do you think that was? We ran out of inventory. Now that's a luxury problem that I think most businesses would yearn for, right? They sold so much that they just couldn't keep up with inventory. Okay, now we need to get back to that agile and development, right? So as we think about this, business agility, we think about having effective marketing. If you can do that, wow, imagine if you're able to get these types of results. Jeff Sutherland, one of the creators of Scrum, says Scrum helps you do twice the work in half the time. In fact, when he was speaking at a recent Scrum gathering, he said, people tell him, Jeff, you shouldn't have called your book that because Scrum helps you do so much more than twice the work in half the time. It's like quadruple or more than that, right? So when we start to apply Agile in different areas, this is just in marketing. Wow, that's tied to sales. Wow, that's pretty incredible, right? So business agility is more than just the development team, more than just that department. I want to introduce the concept of the 80-20 rule. This is something that we talk a lot about when we talk about who are we trying to market to? Can we reach more people with less effort? Have you guys ever looked into this? It's pretty fascinating. I pulled up some stats from Wikipedia. The richest 20% of people in the world have like 80% of all the money, right? Okay, that's interesting. We look at 80% of problems can be attributed to 20% of their causes. 80% of a company's complaints from 20% of their customers. Wow. 80% of a company's profits from 20% of the time their staff spends. Oh, that's interesting, right? And this principle, it just applies over and over again. This is what we're wanting to look at, how we can apply in how we work. Can we work smarter? Can we do more with less? Can we take the time to get the right direction and then crank up the speed? Can we try something different? Can we experiment? Because if we're just doing business as usual, well, we're probably going to just get what we've always gotten. And then how are we going to get to that higher performance and that higher output? One of the concepts that I really like by Alistair Coburn is he talks about the heart of Agile. Now, Alistair Cockburn is one of the original creators of the Agile Manifesto. He was one of the guys that was there when they originally created that. And has anyone here been exploring any scaling frameworks recently? Have you heard of these different scaling frameworks? I had someone walk into a training class I did, and they brought in a binder from one of these other classes, and it was like 1.5 inches thick. And he was trying to follow through the product owner training and reference this scaling framework that had all of this just stuff there. You see people like Alistair see this and they say, that's not what we intended when we wrote the Agile Manifesto. We did not think that you needed 1.5 inches thick books to tell you how to apply this stuff. Listening to Ron Jeffries and Chet Hendrickson just a couple years ago at the Agile Alliance conference in Atlanta, Chet was saying, why are all these people talking about scaling when they can't even deliver in 2 weeks? Right? He's like, can we start to deliver on a regular cadence first and then start to scale that, scale the good practices, rather than trying to like jump into applying Agile and instantly scale it, right? Well, can we get it working right first? So when we think about the heart of Agile, what Alistair says is that the heart is just collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. These are the 4 things that you need, and this is really at the core of what Agile really is. Collaborate to deliver, and then reflect and improve. And if you're doing this, it's really at the heart of what Agile is. So I'd also like to invite you to consider culture. So we talked about business agility, think like an entrepreneur, but can you consider the culture of the organization? Now, I've had the privilege of attending the Agile Leadership Training by Michael Sahota, who's a certified enterprise coach, and he's worked with many companies across the world, and I really realized one big thing when I first went through that training. There was a lot that I didn't know. In fact, I think what I thought I knew was about this much, and what I realized I didn't know was like up to here. It's like, oh, wow, okay, there's all this other stuff. And Michael's definition of culture, I think the official definition is, it's this wibbly wobbly thing that's really challenging to kind of put your thumb on exactly what it is. We can't necessarily see it. Not sure if you can feel it. We can feel it if there's good culture, maybe in like the vibe or the energy in the company, but it's a little bit harder to figure out how you get it, right? How do we create good culture? So there's a couple of concepts I'd like to invite you to consider, a couple of areas that I think maybe we could start with. Can we look at our organization, and are we focusing on the customer? Are we looking at what's the value? What's important to your organization? For an Agile organization, well, maybe you want to have a high focus on the customer. Maybe you want to be looking at delivering value. Maybe we want to have that as a high emphasis of things that are important. What about leadership support? Now, when I say leadership support, I'm talking about the mindset and the action. Do the leaders actually understand what Agile really means? What does it really mean to be Agile? And then are they actually taking action to support the teams? I went in to do a training class for a very large bank in North America, and I remember the lady who coordinated it. She was so excited and so proud about all of the support that leadership gave because they had all this training that they did. They had this training center, and they did all this training in the training center. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's cool. But what happened when I got in there to work with the teams? What do you think I heard from them? Were they excited about the beautiful training center and all the training that they got to attend? No, they had questions like, how is this going to work when we can't even have a co-located working space? How is this going to work when I'm on like 8 different projects? So the actual actions that the leadership took, like, well, they made a cool video that talked about how they supported Agile. They were excited about that, but there wasn't actually the action that people could see. People didn't feel the support. Also, safety. Is it safe for people to experiment? Does fail mean something bad, or does fail mean that you're learning? So is it safe for people to try new things? Is it safe for people to maybe try something different? If not, well, if we can't experiment, then how do we learn? And what about roadblock removal? Is this taken seriously? Are we focused on the results? Because if we're focused on the results, then we should be focused on what the roadblocks are preventing us from getting those results. Has anybody heard about the work Joe Justice is doing with Team Wikispeed? They're building cars with Scrum. It's incredible. I had an opportunity to visit the Wikispeed Microfactory last year in February, and we literally started building a car from the nuts and bolts from the ground up and getting it to where we could put in the engine, put on the wheels, and drive it around a racetrack. And it was a really incredible experience because that sounds kind of complicated, right? Building a car like from scratch, like without having a lot of experience in that, right? And so, looking at that, another thing Joe is talking about is how they're actually, at Scrum Inc., Jeff Sutherland's company, Scrum Inc., they're actually helping build jets with Scrum. Building jets. Now, that's just a little bit more complex than building a car, right? And, I mean, it kind of blew my mind when I heard this. And one of the things that I picked up as one of the keys that was really important that was helping them to do this and be successful at it is Joe was talking about how they had the daily Scrum for the teams, right? And so at 7 a.m., every team would have their daily Scrum. Now at 7:15, after the 15-minute time box, they'd have the Scrum of Scrums. Now 15 minutes later, 7:30, they'd have the Scrum of Scrums. And 15 minutes later, Scrum of Scrums. And they kept going until they got up to the executive action team at 8 o'clock. And by 8 o'clock every morning, the impediments that every team was facing was escalated to top-level management, to the C-level, to the VPs, for them to have their biggest focus for the day to be to remove those impediments. Wow, right? Can you even imagine that? How cool would that be? So we want to talk about business agility. If you have the executive leadership hearing a summary of all the impediments of the teams every day, how much faster can we operate? How much more fluid can we be? And that's how they're iterating jets in 6 months, apparently, right? So when we start to think about these things, it kind of goes back to, what's the tolerance level in the organization? What's the environment? What's the support? Is it the environment where we can do this? Do team members feel supported? Are the actions of the leaders backing up? And do they actually have the agile mindset? And then are they doing things that support that? So, what is culture? How do we start to affect that? Well, when we look at the consciousness and the structure of an organization, that's one place to start. And what's interesting is that there's one of these areas that people pay more attention to than the others. Which one do you think it might be? I'm hearing a little murmuring of structures, perhaps? Yeah, so what do I mean when I say consciousness? Well, this is where, we talked about a little bit of the concept of, problems cannot be solved in the same space which they showed up. So we can't just always do the same thing and expect to get something different. So when we try to solution things in the same area where the problems arose, well, maybe that's not going to help us have great output. Maybe we need to try something different. Maybe we need to have more trust, maybe having understanding, connection, a space where people can be creative, can be happy. What if we really had that environment where people were energized and excited to come to work? What might that look like? What might that feel like? Now, let's look at the structure. So the structure is where, that's like determining the mode in which the organization is going to operate and performs. Maybe looking at how activities such as task allocation, coordination, and supervision are done, and determining how roles, power, and responsibilities are assigned, controlled, and coordinated. Which one of these might be easier to manage? Maybe the structure? Well, that looks like stuff that we can kind of look and see and feel and maybe control a little bit more effectively. The consciousness stuff, that's a little bit more challenging. Okay, so because it's more challenging, are we not doing it? Or are we doing it, right? So when you start to think about that, how often do you think the consciousness side is neglected? Because it's harder to address. Okay, so how can we truly be agile if we're not touching the culture of the organization? So we've talked about with business agility wanting to go from end to end, but if we're not even considering the culture, and for years I taught teams how to do Agile and how to do Scrum, and I didn't even mention culture because, why would I? It's not in the framework, right? And then I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is important. And once I started talking about culture, people started also talking about culture. So actually just shining a light of awareness on it can get that ball started. So one of the things that Michael Sahota talks about that I really think is powerful is the concept of doing Agile versus being Agile. So I wanted to share this with you today because when you think about the practices of what we're doing, well, according to the version 1 survey, why are people using Agile and what are the benefits that they're getting? In the State of Agile survey every year, they say, well, people are seeing ability to better manage changing priorities, having more visibility, more productivity, better quality, less risk. These are the benefits that people are getting by using Agile. Okay, that's great. Maybe that's 20% of the benefit, but what if there was more that you don't even know you could have in productivity? If there's more output, there's higher performance out there that you're not even realizing because you're not considering it. So let's look at what could get us that 3x benefit. Okay, what if we aimed for customers that were delighted? What if we wanted people to have more joy at work? What if we had people actually engaged and excited about coming to work? If you guys ever looked at the percentage of people that are engaged versus disengaged, it is shocking. It's like, I think it was 40% of people are actively disengaged, which means like they're looking for other jobs or they're just not even into what they're doing at all at work. That's almost 50%. That's almost half of people at work are disengaged or actively just checked out. What if we had an environment of innovation that allowed for creativity and continuous learning? Can you imagine? When you look at the Agile Manifesto and the principles, there's 12 supporting principles, and my favorite principle is number 5. And it says, if we have our teams and we give people the environment and support that they need and trust them to get the job done by building teams around motivated individuals, that's really what this is all about, right? Now, sometimes people will say they're skeptical of that because they're like, wait a minute. Is that really something we can achieve? Well, that's really like the green grass. That's the meadow, right? That's like the meadow with all the flowers, and you've got like all the little forest creatures like frolicking through the meadow, and you got Bambi, and Bambi's mom is still alive, and everyone's happy, right? And you start to look at, well, that's what we're really aiming for. So yeah, we want higher performance, we want better output, but what if we had a better environment? What if people were actually energized and excited about going to work? And what could that mean for the output of our product and for our customers and how happy they are? So this is really what we're trying to get to here, right? With business agility, it's not just process and structure and frameworks. It's looking at what is it that we could do that could create an amazing product with really delighted customers and have people, an environment where people love being at work. And what if we could just kind of infuse that into the culture, into our way of working? What if we had people that thought like entrepreneurs and said, well, what could I do? What could be possible? What could I challenge in the status quo? And what if we could make it an amazing work environment and then also have a little bit of fun while doing it while creating an amazing product? So when we think about being versus doing, are you just doing the process, or are you truly embracing the mindset? And are you really living and breathing that? And so the final thought I'd like to leave with you is, can we be the change that we want to see? When you think about leadership, leadership starts with you. It starts with yourself, right? We can be that positive influence. We can start to be more agile. We can start to look to remove roadblocks ourselves, right? There's things we can do to be that positive change. And when we look at the pillars of personal impact, it starts with, well, we want to get stuff done, and that's our capability. We want to get the right stuff done, and that has to do with priority. And then we want to listen to make sure that we're aligned. So if you look at personal impact, how do you have impact? Well, are you getting things done? Because that would have some impact, but is it the right stuff? And is it aligned with, people around you or in your organization, right? And at the basis of this, we need to have trust. Now, what's interesting is I've been working with Peter Stevens, another Agile trainer from Switzerland, and we were talking about this concept of, with personal agility, how it can scale to the organizational level. And in fact, if we start with these pillars, but add one fourth pillar, we can look at these for the 4 pillars for transformation. We can say, okay, so as an organization, we want our teams to be getting stuff done. We want them to get the right stuff done, make sure it's the right priority, and we want to make sure that we're listening and we have that alignment. But then we also have a consideration here where we need to make sure that we have the mindset, the agile mindset, and have the right environment to support the team. So this is one of the biggest challenges that I've heard from teams, is that they don't feel supported. They don't feel like they can actually go out and be effectively equipped with what they just learned on how to do agile, but can I actually do that in my environment, right? And so when we look at this, we look at, well, we want high-performing teams ultimately. And for this, we need to have a shared goal. So we want to have alignment throughout the organization on teams knowing how what they do is going to help support that greater goal. And when you look at the teams focusing on getting stuff done, we have the product owner helping make sure we get the right stuff done. Everybody, we want to have a shared responsibility of listening, and then leadership helping to cultivate the mindset and create the right environment. This is really where we can start to get those higher performing teams in an organization. And at the base, we want to have shared values, principles that helps with the mindset. One more photo up here, because at the base, we have trust. And without trust, what do we really have? So when you think about how can we start to have impact, well, can we do it in our teams? Can we create a culture bubble? Can we start to create that excitement and that engagement? Can we help to share the vision more effectively with our team so that our team knows what we're doing? One of the saddest things that I've heard is when you have team members that they're just working through a backlog and they don't actually know what that work is supporting. And there was an organization I went in to work with a couple of years ago in the Chicago area, and all of the teams, they're very reactive. There were no goals, there was no vision, and they were just working through backlog items. Now, how excited can you get just working through backlog items? Not that excited, right? They weren't that related. There was no greater grouping or goal or thing that they were aligned with, that they were working toward. And the teams, they just weren't very excited about anything because they didn't really have a reason to be. And what was interesting, I was doing an agile assessment with this company, and what I realized was that I figured out by the time I got to the executive leadership team what the problem was. There was no vision at the leadership level of the organization, so that trickled down. The teams didn't have a vision. They didn't have a shared goal. They didn't have any guidance on what they were doing and how that contributed to the greater goals of the organization. So without the vision, without the direction, people were just working on random stuff in backlogs, and that wasn't anything to get excited about. So what we started to identify was that if we could have that vision, if we could have those shared goals, we could have some more direction, that maybe that's something that could help the teams find something to rally around. So when we think about these concepts, when we think about, what are we trying to do? Imagine what impact could you make if your whole organization truly embraced agility. When we talk about business agility, it's not just with one team, and it's not just in the IT department. We're talking about different departments. We talked about how teams are using it in marketing, looking at HR, looking at what's possible. This can expand to finance, and we can look at agility throughout the whole organization. Now, to do this, we might need to translate some of the concepts to the other departments. We might need to really look at what's at the heart of the culture. Is the culture and environment something that's going to help support how the teams actually work? Can we think more like an entrepreneur? Can we think about experimenting? We saw this in several presentations today. We saw different culture models. We saw, the concept of experimentation and lean startup, right? We talked about some of those things. So can we start to be the change? Can we start to take some of these concepts and apply them? And can we start to get those small incremental wins that's going to show from your project to other projects in the organization that Agile does work? And can we try to experiment in different departments and see what's possible? So when you think of business agility, I want to encourage you to think about what's possible. Think about what you could try. Think about how you could create a little culture bubble within your realm, within what you can reach. And think about how we can not just be agile within couple of teams or with a specific department, how we can start to get those benefits from just doing Agile to being Agile, having the mindset, having people that are excited, engaged, and energized and going into work every day, having people that are motivated, having great, delighted customers because you have great products that you're delivering, and really creating that ultimate environment of where you can have motivated people with the environment and support that they need, and we can trust them to get the job done. Thank you. So that concludes our conference for the day. Kulawat, do you have any closing words? Any questions? Yes.
As you mentioned earlier, that we have to make our team that excited. We have to our team that shares our goals. But I got questions about something. When we talk about excited, that we feel excited when we made a new things or another thing that makes our perspective. But as time goes on, we will this again, then we get used to it. That how did you find that every day that your team is found that they are excited every day? Because they will get used to it eventually.
Okay, so is the question, you're starting to do some things, you're getting some results with Agile, but day in, day out, how do you keep that excitement? Everything starts to kind of be one and the same. Yeah, I've heard a lot of teams where they'll say, Maria, we're sprinting and sprinting, but when do we get a break, right? And it's just kind of rinsing and repeating, and it's starting to all get monotonous, and there's pressure, and there's a lot of items being crammed into each iteration that they're working on, and then it doesn't feel fun anymore, or they're not feeling that excitement. I think that, sometimes that gets back to the organization, gets back to how the culture is, but what can we do within our control? And I think sometimes that gets into the retrospectives. If we can really have real conversations about what's working and what's not working and what we can do differently. But to do that, we need to switch it up and not just say those things in that exact way, right? So can we, as a Scrum Master, can we switch up? Can we facilitate different retrospective approaches? Can we pull out more things that could be different, that we could try? It takes courage sometimes to go up, and when the team's feeling downtrodden, to say, hey, what are the impediments that are causing the team to feel like this, where they don't really care, or they're feeling like things aren't very easy. And so that might take the Scrum Master or someone going out and saying, hey, what's not working, what can be better? I was at an Agile meetup. We held an Agile social in Tampa, Florida about a month ago, and there were a couple of ladies there that they had been in a Scrum Master class that I had led 3 years prior. So it was kind of cool to see them again after 3 years. And one of them, she was like a ninja. She was like a Scrum Master ninja. I was so proud. I was like, did I create this? Like, I know she went off and learned more things after the class that I taught, but I was very impressed. And we were talking about different retrospective techniques, and we were talking about retrospectives and reflections, and we were talking about what are things you can do to switch it up, to keep it fresh, to make it more fun for the teams. And she was pulling out all kinds of different approaches, and she's like, oh yeah, we do waffle retrospectives. I was like, waffle retrospectives? I'm not familiar with that one. She's like, oh yeah, so I bring in a couple of waffle makers and have some other people also, and then we make waffles for each other, and I bring in all these different sprinkles and different like fruit and like different stuff for toppings, and then you like find out what kind of waffle and toppings people want on the team, and then you make them their waffle. And I was like, okay, that's amazing. I've never done that, right? And I was like mind blown. And she had like 5 to 10 other examples like that I've never heard of. And I was like, okay, so it's never dull on her team, right? She's always finding new ways for people to talk about things, about getting people to communicate, getting people to connect. And I also have a suspicion that she's not afraid to go and escalate things that are holding back the team. So if you start to get into that monotony, I think sometimes you want to look within the team, you want to look outside the team. What are the things that are external to the team that are maybe causing them to feel oppressed or not excited. A lot of times that's external pressure on delivering, I've found. And then also, what can you do within the team to switch it up? What can you do to have fun? Does anyone ever use a speaking token with your teams? I once went into a team and I started passing around like a crisp $20 bill. And like people were like, ooh, like what are they gonna like run out of the room with this $20 bill, right? Let me make it a $100 bill. Like, and it was just funny because people just like got excited because they could hold money. I'm like, really? You guys hold money every day though, right? You know, but like the silliest little things can add excitement that can switch it up. So I think as someone working with a team, you want to see what can we do differently within the team? How can you keep it fresh? And I think a lot of times that's through good facilitation skills and constantly learning and listening to other teams on what they're doing, and then looking external to the team to say what are the things that are oppressing them that might make them feel like, oh, none of this really matters anyway, and then trying to have the courage to go out and really truly address them. Does that help? Okay, awesome. Any other questions? Any final questions? Any life questions?
You share about the personal agilities. It seems so many knowledge, insights, that information and knowledge. If you want to learn more about the best practice for each pillars, what should we start? And for the new leaders, like what kind of the behavior, what kind of mindset? Is there any websites or document or something we can follow if you can share?
Okay, great question. So question on personal agility and the pillars, something to learn more about that. If you go to mypersonalagility.org, you can get some free resources. So Peter Stevens and I are authoring a book on personal agility, where the first chapter is available for free to download. We also have a stakeholder agreement canvas. So that's a tool that you can use that can help to create the alignment. That's downloadable for free as well. So mypersonalagility.org is where you can go to get the personal agility guide, first chapter of the book, and the stakeholder canvas that's going to help to apply that to create those pillars. So, thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, it's been wonderful being here again this year. Would love to connect with everyone on social media, Maria Matarelli on LinkedIn and Facebook. I'm going to be here for the next week, leading an Agile marketing training this weekend, Certified Scrum Product Owner and Scrum Masterclass. So it's an honor to be back here in Thailand. Thank you.
Okay. So just a token of appreciation from Agile Tour, Bangkok.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And last thing, before we have a group photo, we got quite a few questions today on